Welcome back to The Explainer. So, today we are diving headfirst into a really fascinating concept from the Eclectic Leadership Movement. It's called vibe coaching. And honestly, right off the bat, the source text hits us with this deeply profound irony. It points out that the people who need coaching the absolute most are, wildly enough, often the exact ones who are least served by it. So, let's unpack exactly why that is.
So here's the big question to ground us. Why exactly does traditional coaching fail the people who need it most? What's really cool about this manifesto is how it sets the stage for what I'd call a true misfit narrative. It completely challenges the status quo of executive development. It basically argues that the standard, heavily accredited playbook just doesn't work for everyone. If you've ever sat there and felt like the standard professional development track just wasn't built for you, you are going to relate to this. It speaks directly to folks operating at the absolute highest levels of intuition, or those who are just deeply frustrated by conventional cookie-cutter methods. To explain this, the source draws a really brilliant parallel to the tech world. Think about vibe coding. It's this new, beautifully chaotic trend in tech driven by intention, instinct, and rapid iteration, totally skipping the rigid methodologies and those endlessly long specs. Now, contrast that with traditional coaching. The author argues that modern coaching has basically become the exact opposite of vibe coding. It's become rigidly codified, so earnestly credentialed, and honestly a bit obsessed with its own frameworks. The crucial takeaway here? People are not algorithms. We just don't always fit neatly into a rigid step-by-step program.
And this quote brilliantly illustrates the exact problem. The author says, when the scaffolding becomes the building, you have a problem. Coaching was originally all about versatility, but the industry has spent decades building walls, accreditations, competency frameworks, ethical codes, supervision hours. And sure, while all of this is definitely well-intentioned, these rules and structures, the scaffolding, have unfortunately overtaken the actual purpose of coaching, which is the building itself.
So what's the alternative? Enter VIBE. This acronym stands for Versatility In Being Eclectic, and the author points out this is very much intentional. It represents a movement that draws from the absolute full breadth of human wisdom to get actual results. Think of it as the eclectic leadership movement's direct antidote to those overly constrained frameworks we were just talking about. The ultimate goal is enrichment, and the method is simply whatever actually works. Section 1, the 4 vibe modes, a symphony of human wisdom. When we look at these 4 overlapping modes, this is really where vibe parts ways with convention. Imagine a skilled practitioner not as someone blindly following a manual, but rather as a conductor leading an orchestra, moving fluidly between different styles as the moment demands. First up, we have classic coaching, which is all about creating space for the person to find their own answer. Most of the industry lived right here. But then, the author introduces some controversial steps. Teaching, actually transferring knowledge the person lacks. Preaching, speaking with deep passion to jolt someone right out of comfortable inertia. And reaching, going the distance to close the gap. The whole philosophy argues that a practitioner has to be willing to teach or preach when someone is totally stuck, even if traditional rules say a coach should only ever ask questions. I really want to pause and emphasize this last one because it is the absolute core differentiator. Reaching, doing whatever is required for as long as it takes. This is the ultimate mode. It's the total refusal to abandon a client mid-journey simply because some standardized professional code written by an outside entity says, hey, the sessions are over or the work is done. It's an unconditional, unyielding commitment to results. Section 2, the 4 movements. Like jazz, not a sonata. Let's see how these movements actually build on each other. It's improvisational, like jazz. Step 1 is the itch. That's sitting in the restlessness right before a realization hits. Step 2 is the stretch. Encountering new perspectives, which is exactly where a coach might suddenly pivot to becoming a teacher. Step 3 is the switch, intelligently shifting the approach when you realize what got you here simply won't get you there. And finally, step 4 is the ditch, dropping beliefs or habits that just no longer serve you. Notice how the practitioner completely shifts from being just a thinking partner to someone who is entirely unafraid to tell you exactly what baggage needs to be left behind. Section 3, coaching the uncoachable, the extremes of the bell curve. Okay, so who is this actually for? Traditional coaching usually targets the middle majority beautifully, but Vibe is built specifically for both extremes of the curve, pointing out an uncomfortable truth the industry really doesn't like to talk about. On one end, we have the uninitiated. These are people relying entirely on raw intuition and sheer will. They aren't resistant to coaching, they just don't know what it is, and no one has ever helped them examine their engine while it's still running. On the absolute other end, we have the seasoned executive. These are the highly discerning, overqualified leaders who have done all the 360 feedback surveys, sat through standard leadership programs, and honestly find the generic corporate toolkits completely useless for their level. And for those seasoned executives, the author uses this incredible metaphor to capture their exact frustration. They say, the standard toolkit feels like being handed a plastic spoon and told it is a Swiss Army knife. Literally. Is there a more resonant way to put it? It so perfectly validates why high-level misfits feel completely unseen when they're handed yet another generic reflective journal. They are incredibly discerning people, and they need a discerning, highly versatile approach. Section 4. The Unlicensed Thinkers, Practitioners for the Misfits. So who actually delivers this sharper toolkit? Let's meet the unlicensed thinkers. These folks aren't uncredentialed by accident, they are eclectic by design. They proudly operate way outside the conventional rulebook. They draw their wisdom from sports, poetry, culture, failure, you name it, not just a standard curriculum. They prioritize the client's actual result over any rigid methodology. They will gladly, happily teach when traditional rules say they're supposed to only ask questions. And they hold their approaches lightly, with open hands. The ultimate takeaway? Their single non-negotiable metric is the client's result. Everything else, the mode, the method, the style, it's all just in service to that one goal. To really sum up this whole eclectic leadership philosophy, I want to read this really powerful excerpt directly from the source. Leadership wisdom existed across every culture, every century. They gave you a very small slice. You deserve the whole picture. Wow, that is the beating heart of this movement. It is a complete rejection of the idea that all useful knowledge comes from a handful of corporate books published in the last 30 years. It demands drawing from the entire, massive spectrum of human experience to get people exactly where they need to go. Which brings us to our final takeaway, and a pretty provocative question directly inspired by the text to leave you with. Are you ready to ditch the methodology and join the unlicensed thinkers? Whether you feel like the uninitiated self-starter running on raw intuition, or you're that deeply cynical seasoned executive staring at a plastic spoon, this explainer challenges all of us to look way beyond the rigid scaffolding of professional development. Where do you fit within this eclectic leadership movement? It's definitely something to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. And remember, keep questioning the standard toolkit.